Good afternoon and welcome to another edition of Doctor to Doctor in the chat room. I am your host, Dr. Rhonda Shaw, and I am so happy to have you back with me yet another Saturday to discuss relevant topics that impact our communities and our world. I'm very happy to have my special guest with me, who you will hear from very shortly from the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation. And today we're going to be revisiting the topic of human trafficking. But before we move into the interview, as always, I hope that you guys are safe and you are well and that you are using those necessary precautions to stay safe and to keep your family safe, as in wearing your mask and physically distancing yourselves and not congregating in large crowds when you don't have to. Now, we can actually get vaccinated. So make sure that you find out, go to the website tn.gov and find out when you're eligible to be vaccinated, and as quickly as you can get scheduled for your vaccinations. But in the meantime, if you have been exposed to someone or think that you have been exposed, get tested. And if you are positive, make sure that you retest after you've done your necessary quarantine time. Go back and get retested and make sure that you're negative before you expose yourselves to others. Based on the last show that I did with Miss Kelly McAllister from the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation, and based on the feedback that I got from you guys, there were so many aha moments about the topic and the information that we were provided. So many people, including myself, realized that human trafficking is just not necessarily what we always thought it was, what we see in the movies and the things that are posted on social media. The general conception is not just really not the reality of it. And so I remember thinking that it was always the white van pulling up and throwing somebody in there and driving off with them, and not necessarily so. It's actually far more complicated than that in many cases. The more recent statistics that I've seen were from 2018 in an article that I read in a July 2019 USA Today article, where they were saying that worldwide there were like over 5,000 reported cases of human trafficking. And of those cases, 3,700 of those were related to cases or things that happened in Asia and sex trafficking. And I'm hoping that our guests can shed some more light on that for us today and give us more accurate information about that. Today we have I'm going to get this right, Mr. Jeremy Loftcroft.
Loftquest.
Loftquest. I
There we
didn't get
go.
it right.
Hey, you got the first part.
We have Mr. Jeremy Loftquest with us today from the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation. How are you, Jeremy?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for being here and again for being so accommodating. Please just tell us a little bit about you, and then we can just move into this topic.
Sure. So I've been the supervisor for the human trafficking unit here at TBI for roughly 3 years now. Previously worked in our criminal investigation division um, in Chattanooga and the surrounding area down there. Prior to that, been with the Bureau uh, just about 9 years now. And prior to that, went to college at ETSU, got my master's and my undergraduate up there, and was in the Marine Corps for 4 years active duty prior to that. So,
Well, thank you for your service.
well, thank you very much. So, in the scheme of things, I'm still somewhat relatively new to human trafficking when you look at how our unit's built out, but it's been quite the learning curve, and something that I've really gotten a passion for lately, and so yeah, that's me in a quick nutshell.
Yeah, well, thank you so much. So let's just go back to what I said earlier. Let's just talk about generally, what is it? What does it look like? Let's look at the different faces of human trafficking and what it looks like.
Sure. So like you said, human trafficking it's very complex, right? It's not always the white van
Mm-hmm.
in a parking lot somewhere. That does happen. I want to make sure people know that yes, that is a possibility, but percentage wise, that's very small,
Mm-hmm.
very very small in Tennessee specifically. And most of what I'm going to talk about is going to be Tennessee specific because
Yes.
that's what I deal with day in and day out, right? So I know some generalities, nation and worldwide, right? But
Mm-hmm.
focus is definitely here in Tennessee. So what we see, you know, a lot of different types of trafficking. You've got your more classic, for lack of a better way of putting it, pimp-driven
Mm-hmm.
uh, trafficking, where you've got a very specific manipulating, controlling person that's forcing some other person into commercial sex acts or labor as well, and then you've got the familial side, which we see more and more of, and I think that's more of an awareness thing. I don't necessarily think that's happening more often than it did in the past. I think we're being able to identify that more, and that's more definitely more complex because you have a victim that doesn't know or is too young to understand that they're being trafficked
Mm-hmm.
because there's multi layers of an offender there. You've got a family member that might be pushing the child to a landlord to be molested or something in order to get a break on rent.
Mm-hmm.
And so you've got different offenders and different offenses there, right? A lot of times DCS or one of our other partners, local law enforcement partners, could get called in something like that, and they would address the landlord, right? The molestation or anything on that end,
Yeah.
and maybe not peel that onion back one more layer and find out, wait, this is actually trafficking
Mm-hmm.
because the family member's pushing that. And that, I think, that's when a lot of people may hear a lot more about this familial trafficking and go, whoa, how'd this just start happening? And
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that's necessarily the case. We're just being able to track it and find it more, which is good, right? That's what we want, but that's
Right.
just taking uh, a lot of education and a lot of work with a lot of our partners statewide there. So that's one that we're seeing more, and then just the kind of general trafficking that you may see with children or other people being pushed into it, even online, exploited for pictures and videos and that type of stuff. So there's no standard, you know, look of trafficking really. There's just so many different facets to it it's tough to pinpoint and say, yep, this is exactly what you need to look for, and this is what trafficking looks like, right? And I guess I should back up a little bit too, kind of a general snapshot of what defines trafficking,
Mm-hmm.
especially sex trafficking, but it works for both. Kind of a quick answer on it is someone that's being um, forced into committing a sexual act by means of force, fraud, or coercion in exchange for some sort of commercial good or service, really anything of value, right? And you can just replace that sexual aspect with labor, and now you have labor trafficking.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but you have to have those three points to hit trafficking, unless it's some juvenile. If it's a minor involved, then the force, fraud, or coercion doesn't have to be specified because they're a minor, right? It's implied already. So um, that's kind of the easy answer without going into all the statutory definitions and that kind of thing. But uh, that's something I like to tell people, kind of the quick 3 points of what trafficking looks like. And another thing, it doesn't always have to be money
Mm-hmm.
on the commercial aspect. The payment can be any item of value. So that could be housing, that could be food, that could be drugs, that could be rides to and from uh, places of necessity, really anything, makeup, clothes.
Hmm.
So just some things to kind of think about as we go forward and talk more about this.
Hmm. So, based on what I hear you saying, I mean, it seems like the one element that's always there is kind of like maybe the grooming part of it. Is that usually, or does it with trafficking? Does it just happen? You know?
So, yes and no, right? Again, complicated issue, right? I think there's definitely a manipulation, obviously, in any type of trafficking.
Hmm.
Um, a lot of times we run into that with some of our victims that we come across. They may not even realize they're a victim of this
Hmm.
because they've been kind of groomed or manipulated to such a state that uh, it's almost normal for them, or they got put into this position so early on in life that they may not have known anything different
Yeah.
too. So there's definitely a manipulation aspect on any of it for
Hmm.
sure.
Let's talk about the impact of human sex trafficking on our youth. Let's talk a little bit about that.
Sure. So I think it's incredibly impactful. You know, we've got cases as young as 10 and 11-year-old victims. Average that we see is probably around 13 of being put into a trafficking situation. So there, it can have a huge impact, right? You look at some of the older statistics too on average lifespan of some of these trafficking victims only being around 7 years. The, and you put them in at 13, that's short. And we see a lot of that due to manipulation through drugs and just the hard life that it is. Not getting proper medical and dental care, not getting proper nutrition, not um, getting a proper place to live. Like
Mm.
all of that is obviously a factor in that. So, um, you know, it can be um, a possibility for anybody to fall into as well. And I think that's something that we have to make our youth aware of early on and make those people that are in contact with that youth aware of early on. And um, our partner through the Tennessee Anti-Slavery Alliance here and slavery, you know, they put together a great training program for our teachers to kind of help with that awareness and help identify some potential victims very early on there, because you know there's no specific youth from a specific background that is more or less susceptible to this, right? It can be anybody's kid, it can be any socioeconomic background. It it's something that can happen and has happened to kids down the street next door, friends of your kids, or even your child. You know that's the thing. These offenders are just such master manipulators, and they know that adolescent mind, right, is so malleable, and what to pinpoint on, and be able to show how they're going to help and get them kind of trapped into this. So it, it's uh, it's something tough to talk about, especially to youth and well anybody, right? But it's something that needs to be talked about for sure.
Sure, sure. You just said, it can happen to anybody. I remember Kelly shedding some light on, what goes on in the rural areas, you know, versus what people think is just happening in, you know, bigger cities and all of that. Can you talk a little bit about that?
So I touched on this a little bit before too, and what we're seeing rurally is more of that kind of familial trafficking aspect.
Hmm.
um, Mainly because you're not going to be in a setting where uh, you can advertise that child, right, for um, uh, for trafficking on a lot of the websites and stuff that we might see, along uh, the interstates and in places that it's going to be more available. You're going to see the familial where they're trying to get their rent
Mm-hmm.
taken care of,
Mm-hmm.
or a drug debt. We see that a lot, drug debts, and just situations like that. A lot of these different, or not even a drug debt, just to get more drugs for that month. That's kind of what we've been seeing in the rural a little bit more, again, because there's not advertisements online on some of these websites that are known to post trafficking victims, or uh, having the interaction with a lot of people outside of that main circle, either the family and those offenders.
Mm-hmm.
It's been tougher to break into, right, for law enforcement.
Mm-hmm.
But as we're finding more of it, as we are educating more, those school teachers, those kind of first contacts, counselors, doctors, all of that might come in contact, even in a rural setting,
Mm-hmm.
with those potential victims, and then giving us a call, or the hotline a call, is definitely what's helping us see that more.
Okay. You can give us that hotline number later in the interview. Uh,
Absolutely.
so, can you provide us with any of the updated statistics on human trafficking, and particularly as it relates to Tennessee, and just tell us how Tennessee is doing in terms of addressing and combating this issue?
Sure. So, just to give an idea, obviously 2020 was a unique year, right?
To say the
But
very least.
yeah, very least. But one of our main metrics we look at, right, is all the tips and leads that we receive,
Hmm.
whether that's through uh, our local law enforcement partners, our Department of Children's Services, and our partnership with them, the hotline, all of that. And just give you an idea, in 2018, total number of statewide tips and leads we got was 456. Then 2019, we jumped to 728 of those tips and leads. Now 2020, everybody being at home and COVID, one would normally think that we would level off a little bit. We had almost 900 tips and leads last year
Mm.
that we followed up on across the state. So it wasn't as big a jump from 18 to 19, but it was still a significant jump. I mean, almost 900, still got 200 more than the year previous. So that's again on that awareness and education. We've been out there partnering and talking a lot with our law enforcement, our church groups, our doctors groups, bankers, everybody that we can get in front of. That's what we're doing there. We also applied and were awarded a collaborative grant in 2019, which COVID kind of slowed us down a little bit, but we're definitely getting caught up now, to kind of further strengthen our ability to fight trafficking in Tennessee.
Mm-hmm.
It's allowed us to get task force agents from our local law enforcement actually um, uh, signed up with us to be able to be a trafficking law enforcement point of contact in that region. We've got about 12 of those across the state right now. Uh, and then it put us in a collaborative joint leadership with our Tennessee Anti-Slavery Alliance partners, which are our non-governmental organizations across the state that provide the services and that much needed help for trauma, medical, dental, all that kind of stuff for our victims.
Mm-hmm.
So it's all the victim service side, right? We're the law enforcement side, but it put us in partnership with them,
Mm-hmm.
uh, to really come together and collaborate, to get a good game plan and just to further strengthen what we're already doing moving forward. Uh, and it also gave us, honestly, a funding stream that we didn't have before to be a lot more innovative in how we look at it, and to be able to use technology kind of at a more intense tempo and enhanced level than we've ever had before. Um, it's also something that has been really helpful, and I look forward to seeing how it's going to go. But it gave us a research partnership to both do some studies and to kind of evaluate how we are doing um, in this fight towards trafficking with
Right.
MTSU. So they're kind of an evaluator with us, and they're also a research partner. So we're just really kind of getting that kicked off again. 2020 happened, so things got delayed a little bit, but I'm really excited to see how that goes moving forward, and we're going to have some really good data, I think, come out of that to show how good we are doing.
Okay.
Right. There were some studies done in 2011 and 2013,
Mhm.
collaborative studies with Vanderbilt and TBI, and we're looking at kind of doing an update on that because it's been 10 years. I think it's a great time to do that and look at some other stuff too moving forward. Just
Okay.
kind of be innovative and look at some good data to show where we were, where we are now, and where we can go to be most effective.
Effective. Yeah. Yeah. 2020 has definitely made us all reimagine how we live, how we work, how we get the.
Absolutely.
So let's go to break, but I want to talk about some of the legislation that have been passed in this state as it relates to human trafficking. We'll talk about that when we come back, and maybe you can provide us with that hotline number if someone knows of someone or think that they know of someone that's been impacted by human trafficking. We'll be right back on 94.7 FM. And we are back on 94.7 FM. I am here with Mr. Jeremy Loftquest
There we go. Yeah.
of the Tennessee
Perfect.
Bureau investigation. And we are talking about human and sex trafficking. When we left, I'd ask you a little bit about some of the legislation that's been passed in our state to address human trafficking. Can you talk about that and then provide us with that hotline that we could call if we thought we knew of someone that's involved in human trafficking?
Absolutely. So the legislation side, that's there's definitely a lot in there to unpack. So I'll try to keep it as pointed as possible, right? But one of the main ones is our human trafficking statute as a whole. It's TCA 3913-309, and that lays out basically Trafficking for Commercial Sex Act, and gives you all the different aspects of what that is, and also shows that this is a major crime, right? It's a B felony, um, and can be sentenced under an A range felony, so it can be a absolute top tier felony for someone caught in trafficking, and that covers both your trafficker, the pimp type people, anybody on that end, as well as purchasers. So again, going back to the beginning, this this crime has different elements that a lot of other crimes may not have, right? You've got a victim, you've got a buyer, and then you oftentimes have a that manipulator or the trafficker themselves too, right? So you kind of have two offenders in this crime a lot of times, and so that addresses both of those. And it there's some other statutes in there that push and define more the promoting of prostitution and how that fits in with trafficking for commercial sex act, promoting prostitution of a minor, and how that fits, And then one that I think is really interesting that a lot of people should know about too is that there's legislation that establishes human trafficking of a minor is classified as severe child abuse as well. So that falls under a whole nother range of uh, possible punishments and elements of the crime, right? But it's severe child abuse, which it absolutely is. But we may know that, but luckily we have statute now that shows that as well, right? Some other things that we've passed in the state, we have a Human Trafficking Advisory Council that is a lot of your policy level leaders from across the state that all come together as needed, but at a minimum once a year, usually 3 or 4 times a year we come together. We discuss legislation, what needs to be addressed there. We discuss best practices. We discuss, which different organizations need more resources, or how can we help to address different things across the state. And it just brings all of those partners together in one room, or one Zoom meeting, basically. So, but yeah, so there's restitution for human trafficking victims. There's been statutes passed for that as well, right? And we've had some amendments too to just help with some of the defenses as well in recent time. But the main one, like I said, kind of getting back to 309, 3913, 309, which is Trafficking for Commercial Sex Act. And there obviously there's more under that 305 and that type of stuff that's for labor trafficking as well. So when we're talking about human trafficking, a lot of people default automatically to sex trafficking or trafficking of a minor, right? We definitely need to be considering labor trafficking as well, because that's happening too.
Okay. You talked about some studies that had been done back in 2013 in your partnership with like Vanderbilt. Together. Back in 2013, Tennessee was ranked the toughest state in the nation regarding human trafficking and protecting children from sex trafficking. How is the state ranked right now? Do you know, or is that going to be something that you'll find out as you partner with MTSU and you?
Sure. So I believe I'm sorry. I believe you're referencing the Shared Hope International state ranks, the Protected Innocence Challenge. And yes, so from 2017, 2018, 2019, we were number 1 in the U.S., ranked as high out of all 50 states. We were the highest. From 2013 on, we've had an A rating, right? They do a classic A, B, C, D rating. So we've had an A rating since 2013. But starting in 2017 and the subsequent 2 years after that, we've had the top rating. And a lot of that does go back to legislation and our victim services. We've got such great partners with our victim services, and they're just so specific to trafficking and do such a good job there. That's part of that rank as well. So we don't know how we did in 2020 yet, or I'm not aware. We may know, and I'm not aware right now, but I know some things had changed in how that rating has come out. So I'll be interested to see. We really like those reports because it shows us where we need to work, or gives us suggestions, I guess, on where we need to strengthen ourselves. We may be number 1, but we want to keep that, right? We want to continue to be very strong in our fight against trafficking, and the only way to do that is to know where to strengthen ourselves up, where to shore ourselves up there, and I mean, we're not going to get complacent, but not get complacent in that top spot.
Yeah. So do you attribute, I mean, you've mentioned some of the strategies that, Tennessee has in place for addressing the issue. So do you attribute a lot of where Tennessee stands with, the fact that you do the research and that you do try to evaluate the measures that you put in place? Are there any other specific things or strategies that you want to share that you think Tennessee is doing to rank so high?
I think that's a very large portion of it is the fact that we try to get other points of view, right, from some of our other partners, as well as look outside the state, see what some of the other states are doing,
Hmm.
and utilizing what we can there, trying to be innovative, uh, both with how we're catching offenders, how we're sentencing offenders, and how we're deterring this as well. Right, that's a big part of it. We're we need to not only disrupt kind of how this criminal business model works,
Hmm.
by not letting the buyers find the victims, or finding the victims and getting them away from the offenders before they can go to the buyers or anything like that. We're trying to disrupt that as best we can, and then we're also looking at um, rescuing those people, getting people out of that, like I mentioned too, getting away from the offenders,
Hmm.
and just dismantling the criminal organizations that are perpetuating this
Hmm.
in general. And a lot of that has to do with our victim service side. I think we get a lot of um, good information from them on, what's happening, what's current trends are, and that kind of thing,
Okay.
as well as allowing us a really good way to be more victim centric, right, and not just offender centric,
Mhm.
which is what law enforcement tends to be, right? We go after the bad guys. That's what we're here to do, is put bad guys in jail. But we're in trafficking, and in my unit, we're a little more unique in the sense that we're really wanting to get the people out of this life. We're trying to get these victims. We're trying to get them into services. Right. That's what's super important to us. Uh, if we get to arrest people and get the people out of trafficking, then that's a win-win. Right. But we really have been trying to take a victim-centric view, and I think that's pushed us towards success quite a bit as well too, in how we're combating this, and really that's a lot of shared hope, and even um, some of the federal grant want us to do right, and so luckily we're trying to do that very well. So.
So we live in this technological age, right? And, people are able to hide a little bit better sometimes in cyberspace and in terms of what they do. Is is that going to be an element that would make it difficult for this to ever really get under control? I mean, um, can we really look a whole lot better than where we are because of because of the internet?
I I think absolutely, we're going to continue to progress in our enforcement, right? I touched on it before with, we're actively working on deterring buyers, disrupting the marketplace, dismantling these organizations, and people think they're hiding on the internet.
Mhm.
A lot of times when they may not be as much, or good old fashioned police work, right? Will still be able to point us in the right direction on this. Because yes, while things have been pushed uh, in different directions, and not necessarily on the street corner like people might think, you'll find more victims that way. You know, a lot of them are definitely more uh, being promoted through cyberspace and all these different websites and that kind of thing. It's hasn't slowed us down any. Um, and I think, like I touched on with the grant before, we're able to, and we have been looking at a lot more innovative ways to kind of dissuade the buyers. I think that's a big part of it, is that deterrence, as well as educate the public, our youth, so they're not the public's kind of an extra set of eyes for us, because we can't be everywhere at once. And then our youth, knowing what to look out for and what pitfalls to avoid, and that type of thing. I think education and identification are the key to it. Uh, it's not all kicking in doors and locking up bad guys. I think the education side is going to be what's really going to help us tamp this down.
Hmm. Are human trafficking and prostitution the same thing? If are they, and if not, can you just give the distinction, because you've mentioned like the street corners and the pimp.
Sure,
Let's kind of make
absolutely, and
it in there.
that's a great question, and I'm really glad you asked that, because we get that a lot.
Hmm.
But it absolutely is not the same thing.
Hmm.
They are uh, two very different um, animals, I guess,
Hmm.
for lack of a better way to put it, right? Remember at the beginning, I kind of talked about the three main elements for human trafficking. You know, you've got the Commercial Sex Act, so you've got a trade of goods and services for the sexual act, right? Now,
Hmm.
if you just have those two, that's prostitution.
Hmm.
But there was the third aspect that I talked about with the force, fraud, or coercion. Now, that's what gets you into trafficking. So if you have that third element, they're being forced, they're, you know, having drugs either given or withheld from them, some type of coercion along those lines, right? Or just fraudulently put into this type of position, told it was something else, right? We see that with some of our transnational organizations that we
Hmm.
see. Uh, you know, that they think they're coming over to the U.S. for something completely different, and then put into a situation like this. So you have those three, right? And then that's human trafficking. If you just have money for sex, that's prostitution. And then, you know, there's uh, sex with force, fraud, or coercion. That's rape, right? So you got to have all 3 points to it to hit trafficking. If that
Okay.
makes sense. Hopefully that's made sense to me.
Yeah. So you spoke a little bit about, how important it is to educate the public and to educate our youth. Just quickly, other than coming on Doctor to Doctor in the chat room, what are what are some of the ways that you guys are going about educating the public? And I'd really love to hear how you're educating the youth. Um,
Sure. So, you know, we get a lot of requests on. So on one side, it's kind of a requested training that we can provide to anybody that asks. Really, if we have the personnel available at that time, right? We do church groups, a lot of church groups, a lot of civic organizations, um, and that's really where we're getting a lot of that kind of education. Here's what trafficking is. Here's what you need to look out for. Here's what you do if you see it. Type of education, and then kind of the secondary, what I would consider kind of a trickle down effect, right? By educating those teachers, educating um, counselors, and all those school workers, health department,
mhm,
all those types. We educate or try to provide education, or they get, you know, uh, the courses through End Slavery Tennessee or anything like that. That that then helps because they can they're in contact with that youth population, so then they're able to pass that along and say, hey, look what you're looking at right now.
Hmm.
That's what's going on,
Hmm.
or look out for this, and let us know if something's going on there. So that's a big part of it. We're we're working towards some more kind of public service training type stuff. We have a lot of information, and it's a work in progress right now, but it's really coming along nicely with the It Has to Stop website. So ithastostop.com has a lot of resources and information out there as well, and that can kind of just point people in the right direction.
Hmm.
And then shows like this, right? Public, uh, being invited, and allowing us to pass along the information across the state, like this
I
helps
appreciate
a lot
so
too.
much. It's been so helpful. So we had said earlier we were going to provide a number, a hotline for the audience if they thought that they knew someone was involved in human trafficking. Would you provide that for us before we go to break, please?
Sure, absolutely. So the Tennessee Human Trafficking Hotline is 1-855-558-6484.
That is
Oh, too many numbers. I'm sorry. 855-55-6484. 1-855-55-6484. There we go. That's Tennessee Human Trafficking Hotline.
it is 1-855-55-6484.
Yes.
Got it. Um, so you talked about educating the public and our youth. Maybe you can provide us with what some of the warning signs are of human trafficking or sex trafficking. We will talk about that after we come back from break. We will be right back on 94.7 FM.